Cases take anywhere from 2 to 8 years before we reach resolution. And only less than 1% of all of our cases go into the litigation process. We usually resolve cases through conciliation, mediation, or such before the case would ever go into litigation. So I think the biggest thing as realtors is you need to just make sure you open up the entire city to your clients. Let your clients tell you where they want to look, where they don't want to look, how much they want to spend. But to not assume, don't assume that they want to live necessarily in areas that look exactly like they look. Just because they may be gay doesn't mean they want to live in an area that's highly populated with gay and lesbians. Just because they're Mexican doesn't mean they necessarily want to only live where it's predominantly Mexican. Some people want to live in different areas. Some people want to raise their children in more diversified areas. And some people can afford to live in areas you may not think they can afford. So that is the biggest thing I see in at the real estate end of it is steering. In the rental property, it's definitely discrimination based on race and national origin, without a doubt, hands down. There are also a lot of people who believe today that they should be able to rent their rental property to people without children. The law basically says a person is a person regardless of the age of that person. And that you can only base tenancy on the number of adults or the number of people, not the number of adults. I'm going to go over a little bit now of fair housing laws, and I know this is going to just bore some of you to death. So I'm sorry about that, but it is what I do. Not bore people. I try not to bore people, but I think fair housing laws are boring, even for me. Protected classes, as I said, race, color, national origin, disability, both mental and physical, religion, sex, familial status. That is children under the age of 18. Those are all covered by federal law. So if you discriminate against someone based on one of those protected classes, that person can sue you and have all the remedies available as the federal law allows. The state of California, being one of the most liberal states in the United States, also picks up the protections of marital status, ancestry, source of income, sexual orientation, age, arbitrary, and gender identity. And I'm going to beg everyone not to ask me to explain gender identity because I really don't understand it yet. It is basically being perceived to be something you are not. So it's assuming someone is male when they may be female or vice versa. That's as far as I can go. Right. Maybe next year I'll have understood it a little bit better. But it's a pretty new classification. The prohibited practices, see, I start talking about the laws and people just get up and leave. Yes?
Well, just about kids, if you or number of people in a unit, is it discrimination then if you have a two-bedroom and so the 2 + 1 thing would be 5 people in there, I guess?
Correct.
If the owner of a property says, well, if I have 2 people, 1 or 2 people versus 5 people, less wear and tear, there's an economic difference to me, can you charge more for 5 people living in the unit versus 1 or 2? Does that become discrimination if the landlord says it's an extra $100 a month to compensate for the...
That does become discrimination.
Then you have to rent at the same amount.
You should not differentiate between someone who has a household of 5 versus someone who has a household of 2. Your security deposit should be standard, but no, you cannot differentiate between the two.
So notwithstanding it made a real economic difference to the owner of the property, you still got to rent at the same. So maybe you rent at the higher, to factor in the wear and tear, whatever it costs are for more people. The one or two person that lives there has to pay that higher. It has to pay the equal amount of rent and maybe pay a little bit more for wear and tear. They won't.
No, if you charge more to the household with more, that is discrimination. So if you have a two-bedroom apartment that you're going to rent to the perfect married couple scenario for, I always underestimate rents right now, let's say $1,500 for a two-bedroom. Then if it's a household of 5, it would also be $1,500. Unless if it's a different unit that you would normally charge more for, if it has more square footage or newer carpet. If you rent a unit that has older carpet and needs updating, you could rent that unit for less than you would rent another unit. But you cannot, the rent cannot be based on the number in the household. Any question? I love questions. Yes.
How can you differentiate between steering and affordability? That's a big
right.
thing. You can only afford so much.
Right.
Therefore, you push into that area because that's your affordability.
Right.
So how can you argue the point that you're steering someone over there?
Well, steering is more so not offering your client the possibility of looking for affordable housing in the area they want. Now, if they want to buy in an area that they obviously cannot afford, I think it's up to you to tell them, you can look at these properties, but you cannot afford these properties. And as a realtor, it's also your responsibility to find properties that they can afford and let them choose if they want to look at them or not. You know, if it's an area that they do not desire. But you can't be held liable to decide what a person, where they should buy. I mean, if someone only wants to pay $400,000 for a house, you need to let them know where they can buy a house for $400,000. And let them look at everything that comes up in $400,000. The difference is you're not making that decision that they wouldn't. Say a huge fixer-upper shows up in an area that they normally couldn't afford, but it's for $400,000. And steering would be not showing it to them because you don't think they would fit in the area. You don't think the schools are good enough, or you don't think the neighbors would like them, or you don't think they would like their neighbors. That's the difference. The difference is you're not deciding what area. Their money's deciding. I'm sorry, what?
How do you prove that you're things like that?
Well, when it's actually true, it's very easy to prove that people are steering. Because we send out testers, investigators, who we give profiles to, and their profiles will be similar, except for maybe one characteristic. It could be their race, or their national origin, or their gender. And we have seen that when there's actual steering, it's obvious that the protected tester, that means what we're investigating for, and say that is national origin, and we say that our client is Korean and was denied housing in an area that is predominantly white.